Hi there, I'm Trevor Coote, and this is Business is Fucking Hard, the podcast where business owners pull back the curtain and talk about the realities of owning a business. We'll hear their stories, learn some lessons, and have some fun along the way. Thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we are joined by Teresa Grobecker. Entering the real estate space from the finance world over a decade ago, Teresa launched Grobecker Holland International and is still CEO at the online real estate brokerage today. She is also CEO of Consortia, a property technology company that has seen growth and challenges. Teresa's entrepreneurial endeavors are bookended with an executive position at Bosscat Home Services and Technologies. I hope you enjoy this episode. Teresa Grobecker, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Trevor Coote. So good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is going to be fun. I've done a number of interviews now, nobody in the tech space, and kind of branching out to an American audience, which I think is going to be fun. We'll get into all of that, what you're doing today, where you are, all of that kind of thing. But as I do with everyone, I want to start with kind of your introduction to business. What was your path into entrepreneurship and business ownership? Was it when you were younger and there was influence around you that you saw people that kind of inspired you? Or was it kind of something that was happenstance and you kind of tumbled into as some people do in the business world?
Yeah, so I started my online real estate brokerage. I think it was the first in San Francisco. I started it as a hobby. I came from Wall Street after business school and decided to make some humans. And while they napped, I was like, I'm going to start a brokerage. And it was just with like a kid on each hip. And I had been doing fix and flip for the family during the Great Recession. And I got my broker's license and I turned to my husband and I said, should I go, I keep getting these recruiting postcards from Coldwell Banker. Should I go work for this guy at Coldwell or should I start my own shop? And my husband just turned at me, looked at me and goes, oh, you're starting your own shop. And so I just kind of stumbled into it. And that's one thing has led to another after all these years. And here we are. So it was purely just a hobby to keep me busy as like a placeholder to have grown up skills until my kids were in school or graduated from high school. I don't know, but it's turned into this.
So I want to touch on it, because I think it sounds like it feeds into the story. Your time on Wall Street, was it physically on Wall Street? Were you or just within kind of the finance world?
I would say the San Francisco version of Wall Street.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Big wirehouses. Yeah. And then like senior vice president kind of roles. And then it was really interesting. I had started this company as a hobby, and then an investment bank offered me a buyout letter unsolicited. Like the CEO had just invited me out to lunch, and then he wrote me this letter saying, I want to buy your real estate brokerage. So it just one thing led to another. And I would say because I knew about investments and structure, and I am an entrepreneur. So an investment bank, right, invests in entrepreneurs.
Right.
So it became like this thread of like, well, there's real estate tied to investments. Like, how do you read the balance sheet, the cap chart, all this kind of stuff? So I think that's what led to receiving that offer.
So, like the entrepreneurial, your venture into business, taking that risk and doing that jump is like, obviously your husband saw something in you. He said, like when you said, should I start my own shop? He endorsed that really readily. What do you feel like having that line of sight, having that kind of understanding of, like you said, in the finance world, you're seeing balance sheets, you're seeing the efforts of startups and of established companies. Do you think that I'm going to assume I know the answer, but helped in your navigation into that entrepreneurial kind of mindset and world?
Yeah, it really, as the CEO of the investment bank said, really helped me identify shit from Shinola pretty quickly.
Right.
Because, it's really easy to look good online. It's quite another thing to like dissect a business strategy and to really know your domain expertise in your business sector. So I think it really helped, I think, in that regard tremendously.
And honestly, that's part of the reason for the podcast, right? Is we see so much glitz and glamour. I mean, not all the time, but like other than headlines about businesses failing, while businesses are struggling and barely making it, we think that like there's this front that gets put on. There's this stoicism in the business world that is quite false in a lot of cases. And of course, when a business approaches somebody like you in the finance world, that's when you start to see, you can pull back that veil a little bit, right? So okay, so investment banking, finance world, and then you see this opportunity. Like you said, a kid on each hip. I like how I like how you said I decided to make a couple of humans. So you get into you look at your husband. He says, "Do it on your own." What did those first days look like? Like that initial like fear. You're not sure what the outcome's going to be. What did that look like in kind of both a physical sense? Were you doing it out of your basement or in an office, and did you have other people around you? But also the emotional sense, like how much pressure did you feel to make this successful?
Yeah, so I've only had like a handful of like nervous breakdowns, right? And heavily medicated at this point, so everything's fine, right? That's saying everything.
Jeez.
So within the first 3 months, I had 25 people working for me, as independent contractors, as real estate brokers. And I was learning real quickly, like the broker always holds that proverbial bag of poop. It always rolls uphill the legal liability of anybody out there saying whatever they want to consumers. And it's on me to make sure the paperwork is tight. Like they have to do their, I have to create protocols. They have to follow them. Everything has to be indexed properly. And then at dinner, like I'm sitting across from this guy who he's like a compliance person in Wall Street, right? He was a managing director at one point covering like half the United States. And all dinner ever was like, is that the correct thing for the client? Consumer suitability, right? Client suitability. And that's a big thing on Wall Street. Like it's a really big deal. So I think the panic attacks first came like, how do I manage this many people? And then within at the first year marker, like fast forward, like one spring forward, it was like the spring of 2014 or so. Like I was like, how do I recruit more people? How do I create a compensation plan? And that was because I was working, to answer your question, like at home alone. I recruited everyone who's worked for me off of Craigslist, right? There are people who have worked for me for over a decade I've never physically met. I get it that there are business models out there that recruit people online all the time, but this didn't exist back then. Or was barely starting up, right? With some of these online.
When would this have been, Teresa? Sorry.
Yeah, I think getting my broker's license in like May of 2012, accepting agents to come work for me in 2013. And by 2014, I'm realizing I am so alone. Like I don't realize at this point that brokers all over the country, like in Canada, the United States, I don't realize that there are other brokers who are like having these thoughts too. I didn't realize that there was a larger ecosystem. So yeah, I felt all alone, and that part was hard. That was probably the most difficult part of getting this going.
I want to dive into. I want to be careful that we don't dive too deep onto the real estate side, because both you and I know that world really, really intimately, and I want to make sure we keep it at kind of the overall business kind of level, so you can keep me in check on that too if I start diving into the real estate questions. But I do want to unpack the loneliness piece, because I think that in so many instances, and especially in the case of a startup when you're just starting, where does that network come from, and how do people feel support? And you have you've got your husband, you've got immediate family members, maybe your core friend group, colleagues that you've built in the finance world and beyond, but who do you lean on in order to start to be able to have people that truly are empathetic and understand what your scenario is, as a business startup and as somebody who's taking on all of this risk and working the long hours out of your basement? What were those next steps to kind of build out that support network for you, if it happened at all?
It didn't happen until much later and a lot of pain.
Okay.
I would say as much as my husband encouraged me to
Right.
this thing, it quickly became, it was like talking to a brick wall. Like, God bless him, he's great. He comes from corporate. He has no idea what it's like to be an entrepreneur. And I admire the heck out of him because he knows how to survive corporate culture really well. Like, round after round of layoffs in the Wall Street space when everything was down, he was like a cockroach. He's like last man standing. And I love him for that, for what he's done for our family. He's great. I would say for me, though, like, I was, he just looked at me like I had two heads. He's like, what are you talking about? And I think that's what makes entrepreneurship feel really lonely, is on the front of it, especially San Francisco real estate. I mean, like, there was a TV show made out of it. They actually called me to be on this show, and I thought it was a prank. So, like, we love real estate in general. Like, we puff up, just like a lot of business owners. We're supposed to look flawless on camera, Facebook, IG, right? Like, we're supposed to have it all together, never cry on camera. But inside you can be melting. And so finding a network, I really relied on my business partner. His name is part of that. We no longer work together. He went to focus on really marketing entrepreneurship, and he crushed it. I could rely on him a lot to like help talk me through like what are the options that are out there. And I would say it wasn't until like 2019 when I joined like the national speaker circuit that I got to like prairie dog up, right? Like, instead of being buried in the ground, I like peeked up and I was like, oh, you've got this issue. I've got this issue. And we mind shared all these great ideas and are figuring out, like, what's in the news? How do I level up? So it took a long time for me to find my tribe.
It's so, I mean, in the business world, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, but even beyond that, as individuals, we live in these bubbles. We know the environment that's immediately around us. And so often we can be surprised that there's others that are going through the same struggles as us, or are in the same situation, or are desperate for that same connection. And I think the business world is full of that. Like, if people can find those connections and figure out how to navigate, and there's organizations like chambers of commerce and different groups like that kind of build that support network and have those opportunities. And I think just based on your story and using this platform, it's encourage people to go out and find that network, so that because others are looking for it too. They're looking for you, and you're desperate to find them. So
what I would say is, like, it's in these, so take those local community places. Those are, for a lot of businesses up until now, unless you're selling online, those are not places where you're going to share your most intimate fears, because you're trying to get business in those circles, right? Whether you're real estate or you're the coffee shop, right? Like, you don't want to share, you don't want fear in the water, right? So you try to not share it there. What I found is, when you go to like a national or a regional kind of group, you're not competing against each other directly. Yeah, you're competing for however many millions of transactions happen like in the whole country, but it's not like a local competitor. So I would highly recommend, if there's any kind of organization for people, like for this kind of business leadership, like where you feel like you can be yourself, which is kind of funny. Like, I have to travel to other cities to see my closest friends.
Right.
Those are the people who really know like what's going on inside me. They'll take a look at me and be like, oh, we're not okay today, huh? And I'm like, no, we're not okay. But like locally, it's like, everything's great. Yeah.
Right. That's I actually really like that take on it as well. And I'm assuming that's why we only see each other a couple of times a year. We're in very different cities. So, okay. So let's, I want to keep progressing here, because I want to get to where you are, kind of today, and kind of the shorter term, pieces around your business. So you do the startup, you've got your 25-ish brokers out there. what did that, were you on kind of a growth trajectory? You've got a different business model. You're more kind of on the tech focused on the brokerage side. What did that kind of growth pattern look like for you, for the
Yeah,
business?
yeah, I think at the highest, I was up to like 50 agents, which was awesome. Not
Yeah.
everyone produces. And then I kept getting picked up, different business ventures or have different ideas because to be on the cutting edge of real estate, like I came up with this idea that got picked up into this larger organization. That was blockchain, as we know, and that's how you and I know each other. So
Yeah.
then it became like, oh, now you're the thought leader in this space, which is terrifying. Like I should not be a thought leader on anything, let me tell you. But like that turned into the next thing, which now I'm picked up and I'm the growth executive at an AI construction company that I'm taking national. Like it's in 8 markets. We have this technology and it reads home inspection reports because I know the real estate transaction. I'm a loan officer, right? Like Blackstone taught me up on title. Like I know all and capital markets, right? So I have the knowledge to understand where this data about the asset lives in home ownership or if you're an investor. So now I'm a growth executive at I guess it's kind of a startup. We're doing a round A.2. So about, the next one will be a B round. And then like I'm planning like what's the exit, which Fortune 50 company buys us. So this has gone, like I said, from hobby to this larger thing. And so I would say the real estate brokerage is this thing that I still have going, right? Like my succession plan for that is like hand it off to my 2 sons and they'll have a real estate brokerage. And if nothing else in life, they'll have a way to feed themselves, right? Like they could build it as big or as small as they want to, but I want them to at least have that license because I can help them with that. And then we'll see where the rest of, my story goes as far as where this goes from here, right? Building up Boss Cat, nationally. I think that's a great adventure. So that's, where it's gone and I guess where we're heading.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there, a lot of terminology and kind of a path that was you summarized that was actually a lot more long and winding than what the Reader's Digest version we just got. So I'm going to get back to the blockchain, the technology space, and unpack that a little bit. But on the brokerage side, so the brokerage is still operating today. How many agents do you have today?
I think about 20 to 25 today.
And is everybody operating in that San Francisco, California area?
So they're all over. I see the signed contracts coming back and they're throughout Northern California.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is a big difference to people who don't know. Like I know, especially East Coast friends, that like East Coast states are very small. Like Northern California is a big swath of land. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting point. The southernmost tip of Ontario is actually more south than the northernmost tip of California. So Canada, yeah. Anyway, I might edit that out.
No, leave it in. I think geographically that's very interesting.
It's a true fact. So you've got do you have aspirations at this point, like kind of that succession, that legacy piece that you're going to leave to your sons? Do you is the brokerage getting your attention as far as growth and kind of a growing business model, or it's just self-sustaining and you just want to keep it the way it is?
Such an interesting question given the times we're in here in the United States.
Yeah, right. Sure.
Yeah. So I advise multiple divisions of the federal government. I know the direction that this could potentially go, right? Like as far as real estate. And if you guys are reading anything, just query like NAR, lawsuit, Department of Justice. Like this is no joke, right? You got the DOJ. I've advised the Federal Reserve, the FHFA, the SEC on all things real estate, crypto, money transference, all this kind of stuff, loans. So because of these macro factors, I understand that you could, in theory, have AI writing all your contracts. You've got the technology that can do all the disclosures, read all the disclosures. What do you need agents for? And I'm not saying I like it or hate it. I'm just stating facts, and this is all over the news. So I'm already seeing agents drop out who have been on my roster. And I'm like, please just stay on as a referral agent. Like, I love you dearly. Like, I want like a connection with you. Like, I want to know how you're doing in life. Stay on as a referral agent. So how much I'm investing in my business is very much determined at this point on which way the industry goes. We also have a lack of housing. We have a lack of inventory. People are locked into low interest rates and not enough people are moving and there aren't enough housing starts. So lots of macro factors that play into how much and where I'm going to market in the industry.
So if we take that, I don't want to unpack kind of the class action lawsuit that's happening within organized real estate or in real estate in the United States and Canada. But if we look at that as kind of just a conversation around the business landscape, we take what you're seeing, trying to make decisions for your business based on these really macro environments. And I mean, the thing that, obviously other business owners can relate to that is COVID, like something that was kind of environmentally kind of macro, as you say, disruptive. And how do we manage that? And right now, the entire real estate industry in the United States is grappling with that. Not only this disruption to the way business is being done, but also technology and artificial intelligence and other things that are having this kind of other effect on the way things are happening. What does that mean for you to be in this vacuum of not being able to make decisions or being challenged with making decisions on what that future looks like for your business?
I welcome hard times. I started my brokerage coming out of hard times. 8 months pregnant, 7 months pregnant when the stock market falls apart, right? And my mother-in-law calls me and she's like, Meryl was just bought by BOFA overnight. She's like this little Filipina woman with like a thick accent. And I'm like, Lisa, there's no way what you said is true. Like, that's like, you're off your rocker. And then sure as shit, right? Like, no, that just happened overnight, right? So the point of that being there's such strong like there's an emotional pain point to that feeling of being helpless, right? And okay, what we learned from that, right? I was a figure skater growing up. Get up and go do it again and land this time, right? So I think it's a matter of taking that fear, that unknown, and going, okay, let's go back to basics. That's what my husband always said, back to basics. All right. So the focus in Silicon Valley, for example, for like the last God knows how long was growth at all costs, burn just piles of cash to get market share, right? And I think we're finally at a point, and this has been covered pretty well in the news. It's like, no, we're going to focus on profitability. Like, like what? You're going to say profitability? That's crazy. So I think whatever we do next has to be focused on productivity, right? Maximizing impact. And that's so easy to do now with AI if you use it as a tool in your business, and then creating profit in your company. Like, stop the hemorrhaging, and then where do you reinvest? So I appreciate when there are external factors that create like a need for increasing the squeeze on whatever is happening. So for me, okay, we might not know exactly where all the shoes land. I have a friend who's saying he's sitting in Esmeralda's closet and waiting for all the shoes to drop. So that's fine. In the meantime, make the most, never let a good crisis go to waste. Like, figure out through this, okay, buffalo run into a tornado. They're the only animal that will run into weather. That's how I feel. We're running into weather. All right. All this is happening. How will I make my business decisions better? If the consumers are scared, the consumers are hearing something like the sky is falling, figure out how to create that blanket of comfort around them. What makes you feel good? How does this, like, it's at the end of the day, we all get paid by our customers. So how do they feel? We all start our journey as a customer, right? Like, we all live in a house. Hopefully no one out there is like living in a box, right? Or on the street. So everyone's in a house. How does that feel as a consumer? And I think as long as you make people feel loved, appreciated, and safe, then the crisis will like just roll off of you. It's hard, but you can make it happen.
And I mean, having that attitude, when you see the crisis coming, when it's on the doorstep, versus hearing the stories after 20 years later, following a crisis where the successful businesses, the ones that even did better or at least navigated through, say, we looked at it as an opportunity. We didn't panic. We went in and said, where are the opportunities for the business that we're doing based on the environment that we're in? And seeing that in front of you and being able to prepare for that and be proactive on it rather than, knowing it's there, then it happens and then reacting. So, great advice, I think, for anybody in the business world, but certainly the folks that you and I surround ourselves with these days in the real estate sector. I want to unpack a little bit. You talked about more the blockchain, the technology piece that you got involved with. We've talked about some venture capital, kind of moving that venture capital environment, moving from burning money for growth versus creating profitability. What was your venture into kind of more that tech blockchain focus side? And how would you differentiate that experience from the brokerage, dealing with realtors, brokers as human beings that were kind of creating that productivity for you, versus talking to VCs and capital, more on the technology and money front?
Oh, this is like to the heart of it. I actually hate blockchain.
Okay, let's unpack it. Be very honest with me, because I think this is the part of the story, especially that comparison, that's going to be super interesting.
Okay, all right, if we're okay with this. I
Absolutely.
could put blockchain in a dumpster. I will bring the fireworks, the gasoline, the matches. I will get a throw torch and just burn it. I hate blockchain. There was a point being in the NAR portfolio where I was like, what am I going to talk about at this conference? And Jeff Turner looks at me like, hey, dipshit, this is the only thing you're talking about for the rest of your life. We're talking about it right now, right? So, and I'm like, so I think that blockchain is a lot of noise, especially in its application, especially in the United States, because our land records there are errors, but for the most part, they're pretty good. Where I see blockchain as useful, I've been approached by the Ukraine, right? Where land records are getting destroyed right now, as you can imagine, right? There's going to be a massive literal land grab. There are countries in Africa and in the Pacific Basin where land records, not even who owns it, but who has rights to use the land for the rest of their life because of certain government contracts, kind of like if you think about Hong Kong and China. So there are all these use cases for blockchain and having a ledger. So that's where I find it useful. For me to talk about it in front of people who run MLSs and county recorder's office, I'm just blow my brains out. This is the biggest waste of time. However, people in investment banking, people in venture capital need to say they're up on this topic and we have somebody who's a thought leader. Gross. So there's a lot of hype, going to the Gartner hype cycle, right? There was a lot of hype, and you know what? I got to meet great people on the road. I'm here talking to you. I have a lot of gratitude for the incredible conversations and friendships that I've built over the time that I've, been in this technology space. It's why I have the job today at BossCap, because I was telling them how to understand data and how that needs to flow through to Fannie and Freddie. Awesome. Blockchain in and of itself, I have yet to see where that goes. I think we're all waiting to see. I mean, I think it's great. We have ETFs now. We know which dogs are probably the winners. That's great. That helps us create a true ecosystem now that we have the blessing from the SEC on Bitcoin and Ethereum. Sorry, I'm getting into the nerd stuff, but you need the compliance bubble. I'm at the dinner table with Steve and he's like, is that correct for the consumer? Yes, honey. Yes. So anyway, that's where I think, we're at the very, very early stages of blockchain, yet to be determined. Looking back, like you're saying, in 20 years, it's going to be amazing to say wow, we were having this conversation. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's shift all of that thinking to Consortia, to your startup that you had in that space. Where is that at?
So let me give some backstory. So to join the NER portfolio, there had to be a valuation on the company. And Morgan Stanley came in and did a valuation that was very high, 8 figures. So
And this is your company. This is your technology startup, not related to the real estate brokerage.
Yeah, completely separate. We saw the applicability, completely separate. So high 8 figures, like you can imagine people's eyes lighting up because they think it's probably like a crypto, right? An easy way to get rich. It brought out the worst in human nature. For anyone, I'm going to say this blanket. I'm sorry, guys, to anyone who's been part of the company. Very few people were just really into the tech part of it. I think it brought out the worst in human nature, even for me at some points, right? And it became this, as a CEO, I had to protect shareholders. And there were some shareholders along the lines who were just like, yeah, it's like smoke and mirrors, the applicability at this point. But let's just sell it for XYZ amount of money or cash out. It's like, I want to be able to look people in the eye after this, right? I'm very young in my career, touch wood, I would hope, right? That I want to be, around I don't want to just take money and run. So Consortia now, finally, I get to make the decision that I've always wanted. We're going to take the code set that we have today, take out some parts that are only applicable in the United States, and then set part of that free on GitHub. And then what I want to do is to make it interconnected with ordinals. That's the term for an NFT on Bitcoin, or to make it Ethereum compatible so that any country, any municipality, think of the Ukraine, think of all the countries I named, that they could take down that code set, deploy it on their servers. Consortia, as a business owner, I don't need to be controlling that for other countries, right? To be fully distributed blockchain, which is the ethos of it, it needs to be interoperable and people need to be able to share data openly. So that's where the company is today.
Okay. So I could nerd out with you on the tech speak all day long. But I want to make sure that the 3 people listening to this podcast are following the bouncing ball here. So we've still got the brokerage that was started when you had a kid on each hip. During in the early 2010s, mid 2010s, you look at kind of the technology environment and start to build out this other business called Consortia, which is which is technology focused and technology based. It goes to an 8-figure valuation. And what does that look like for that business? How many people are working there? You're the CEO. That valuation is done by an external stakeholder, not because somebody offered a VC came in. Usually, sometimes tech companies are valuated based on what they can raise, but you're getting a third party just to give you a valuation. You're not looking for VC money, venture capital money at this point. So what does the company look like when you get that, the company itself? How many people? What kind of product were you providing? What was your?
I think everyone. So the people who came to work for the company were happy to work for shares because I know well enough that blockchain is so nascent. What am I going to go raise millions of dollars on, right? I didn't want to do a crypto because crypto still wasn't legal in the United States. And I had this conversation at the dinner table with Steve. I was like, should we do a crypto? We can move to Hong Kong where it's legal. And he's like, so because of Obama, something that happened in the way the stock market operated, Bank of America Merrill Lynch shut down all East Asia operations, just shut it down overnight. And he's like, well, Merrill just shut that down. So we're not moving to Hong Kong. And I was like, so we're not doing a crypto. Cheers. And we had a glass of wine. I remember that moment. So people in the company, we didn't have a crypto. Everyone was working for equity in the company, trying to figure out what do we use. The product over several iterations was how does a human claim their property NFT, which has a lot of buzz around it, but I'm not really sure what that does. So I've since shut that down. I don't know how applicable that is when there's such great data records. So right now it's just a dev team, my CTO and me, and just figuring out how to package this. And I mean, if Consortia makes like a penny on every transaction as real estate records get traded, and if the platform is Bitcoin or Ethereum, like that's great mailbox money, and like it's a do good thing in the world. So that's where our focus is. And that's how our team has operated, just different people throughout the years looking for, equity and ownership in the company.
And I mean the story of FTX, they did exactly what you were talking about. Went to Asia, started providing back, go to Bermuda and other places, and trying to break into that U.S. market from external, and we all know how that ended up. So, so if you look at so we've got the table set. You've got this high valued company that was issuing shares to provide productivity to influence productivity from your staff, from the folks who are working there. But you've said you weren't completely convinced yourself on what you were producing and the value that it was providing. And I think to your credit and to your point, a lot of companies, when they get an 8-figure valuation, as you said, would just look for that exit strategy. How do we cash out? How do we get out of here and let somebody else deal with the fallout on something that I know might be smoke and mirrors? And you wanted to have something more tangible, more deliverable to the consumer, to the public, to stakeholders, to shareholders, before you made that decision. How supported were you in that decision to be able to not jump on an 8-figure valuation and give people a whole bunch of cash in their bank accounts?
Nobody.
Yeah.
Ever. Sorry. Like, I'm going to say it, if anyone who's been part of the company, nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough.
It's really tough. And that's why today, like, it's just, even my CTO today is like, why would we just let this go for free on GitHub? And like, because we are, because that's where it belongs, right? It's like a United Nations, like, do good kind of a effort. Like, if you believe in the real spirit of what this is supposed to do and make information available, then that's the direction this goes. Yeah, but no one's ever seen that vision. I take that back. One person, he runs a podcast called Silicon Valley Insider, Keith Koo. I will take that back. Keith Koo understood a long time ago that this follows the Reddit business model, the Linux Red Hat business model, where they have a foundation that allows all the code to be free. And then if you want the services, you pay the for-profit business. And he understood that probably in 2018, that this would be the Linux Red Hat like version. So kudos to Keith. He's just so deep in Silicon Valley. He understood it immediately. Getting to that point with everybody who's part of the company and everyone's ego, like freaking hard as balls, man. Just brutal.
So I just want to clarify a couple of things. GitHub is a spot for open source companies that want to share their intellectual property or coding or that to a broader audience because they think it does the world good, can share it there, and others can go in and grab that coding. And so what you're suggesting is that you see more of that that value to the consumer, to the end user, to doing the world good, when you name countries that you have where this can actually be technology that goes to a broader and better use, and that, of course, as a company, when you have shareholders, when you have other folks who want to make some money, can be a challenging environment to work in.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. So let me go to, like, everyone's probably like wondering why this is do good for the rest of the world. So in a lot of America is an anomaly in a handful of countries where you can get a mortgage, right? Like, we take it for granted for everyone who's listening here in Canada or stateside, the US. We take that for granted. And the reason that you can get a mortgage is because a lender, investors pool together their money and they understand the value of the underlying asset. because there are land records. There's a chain of
Right.
title. There's low
Right.
risk. And then layer on all the data we have today. It's insured, right? Like every piece of real estate now is insured once, twice. There are reinsurers on the back end. You got like huge conglomerates going to Lloyd's of London, reinsuring all these policies, right? It's insane. So this is the backbone to the entire global infrastructure. Banking infrastructure relies on the housing department. That's why you've got departments like the OCC, that's the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. You've got the treasurer, the Treasury Department of the United States, that's now looking at the appraisal process, because that's setting the value for real estate. Okay, so what's the point here? Taking this code set, I get goosebumps about how important this is. You take this code set, you deploy it through the world so that other countries, municipalities, governments, lending institutions can start to use this as a framework of data. If you have the data, you can start lending. If people can get a loan, they can buy better property. They improve their quality of their life for themselves, their children, their grandchildren, right? So you're improving, like instead of people living in terrible conditions, they get to finance and pay that off over time. You're creating a banking ecosystem around the assets in a country. And then the banking institution becomes stronger. You're bringing prosperity, money into that country. That's why data records are so important. That's where my fervor for this comes from. Yeah, the rich are going to get rich off these banking products. I'm not stupid. I get that. The person on the ground who's able to get a mortgage, also very important, because we're all consumers at the end of the day. So that's my like Miss America, like Nobel Peace speech about TED Talk, right? About why this is important. So it's more than just the data itself. And that's why I think it should be free. That's why I think it should be open source, right? And if we earn a transaction on a royalty on the back end, like this much, great. It's more than I had yesterday. I don't, that doing good globally, I think is way more important.
One of my previous guests, totally different business environment, different business altogether. But I had a long and winding road full of struggles to get to where he is today, approaching his second $1 billion in sales from a very small startup. And the words he used over and over and over was purpose before profit. And talking about what is the motivation for the company, and if it's strictly money, then you sell out. Then you end up selling false code with smoke and mirrors to a bunch of shareholders, and you have zero impact on the world. If you put purpose first, then you have a tremendous amount of impact, and the profit will follow. And that was kind of his, to summarize a very long conversation with him. That was the biggest piece. So, and I think, you're living that, you're demonstrating that, and in a very, very tough environment. So I want to take a lesson away from this piece of the story. What would you say to somebody who has pressure from all of these people around them based on some sort of similar environment, whether it's a financial evaluation related to the company, whether it's being forced to sell or being pushed to sell because of something that's happening? What's your kind of motivational speech to somebody in that position where they're trying to put purpose above profit?
I'd say listen to that. When you're calm and your gut is calm, that deep breath, that meditation, and the thing that's in your brain at the time that your stomach is at peace, listen to that and lean into that. And if people around you don't believe in that vision, they got to go. Like, there's the door. Like, nothing's keeping you here. And that's what I should have done time and time again. And eventually those people burn off the cap tart pretty easily, because if you just stick to your guns, like, it's going to come out their true intention.
Right.
I'm dealing with the aftermath of one of those right now. So stick with that, see how much pain you can tolerate, right? But if that's your goal, then that's very admirable, and the world needs more of that, and stick with it.
And in your now to kind of yourself, your circumstances as you see yourself going forward in the business world and with the impact that you want to create, do you feel like these experiences have put you in a better position to be able to navigate those circumstances in the future when they come up again, as they inevitably will?
Yeah, I totally do. In fact, it was like in 2022, it was like NAR started to ask me, maybe it was 21, I forget. It runs together. I think it was 22. It was 22. NAR was like, leadership was like, can you write a white paper on what you just said and testifying at the, not testifying, but presenting in front of the Federal Government Technology Committee, right? Like, tell us what you know about the laws. And I'm like, yeah, the laws that I've been talking about, like, as you guys are laughing at me that I'm not, making money with crypto or whatever it is I'm not doing. Like now people are like, wait, there are laws. Teresa, speak about those, right? And I would say it's taken a toll personally on my family, right? Like economically. There was a guy at Merrill who was willing to give me his book of business. I'd wake up every morning, January 1st, making $2, $2 million a year, right? Like I didn't take that. I decided to do this. So it's taken its toll. And I would say I'm in a position where a lot of companies have burned off, like FTX, Luna. Think about all those stable coins that have gotten trashed. Like it's last man standing. I'm not standing super tall. I'm not like a giant in the forest, but I'm still here. In fact, I'm like a seedling still, but I'm still here. I've weathered a wildfire. I'm in Northern California. We like our fires. So yeah, that's how I feel at this point.
And what's next? Where do you see, you've got kind of three avenues that you've got going on? You've got the brokerage, 25 folks in Northern California that are going to work every day and helping consumers navigate a real estate transaction. You've got Consortia, which is a completely different iteration of its former self, looking at a broader impact and purpose for the world. And you've got Boss Cat, where you're kind of in a leadership role with another company. What does all of that look like in the future for Teresa Grobecker?
Definitely from a compliance point of view, be there for my agents, always pick up the phone for them, help them with any issues that they have on transactions. That keeps me relevant and current and tied to the consumer and boots on the ground. I still do investment banking deals from time to time. Right now, doing a fabulous 100% financing for this family that I love, for them to grow and build acquire a business. Nothing gives me greater happiness than putting a Black family, a Hispanic family into a house and getting them a mortgage. It's still incredibly tough. So I live for that. If that's all I could do every day in my life, nothing would make me happier, right? Like I have such passion and fervor for home ownership. So that, a lot of that business runs itself. And because of how I set it up, like with a baby on each hip, I was like, how do I maximize my time and still be available to everyone in my life? Then Consortia, that's at a technical point. That's always been that's an infrastructure technical business. I'm not selling direct to any consumers. That excites me to like push that forward, get it publicity with the right places, and like follow through on some of my visions that I've mentioned. And then Boss Cat takes the majority of my day-to-day time and my hours in the day. And that I love because I get to use all my skills, and I work for really smart people. Like one person was an executive for auction.com during the Great Recession. The other person sold his business to ICE. So these are data-driven it's customer service and data. So I'm learning so much. That's what I have on my plate right now. I made a commitment to them to see that company through to get it acquired, which is going to take a few years. And then from there, we'll see. I don't know that I'm going to stay in the real estate industry. My brain might be hungrier and want to go back to the securities or private equity or hedge fund kind of world. We'll see. It'll just depend on, my life is very serendipitous. I've never had a plan. For not having a plan and becoming a partner at a global investment bank. Like who knew that was a thing? Like apparently, I don't know, if I applied myself in life, I might be a lot further along. So we'll see.
feel like we need an acronym catalog for this episode. NAR, National Association of Realtors; ICE, Intercontinental Exchange; SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. So I want to one question I keep asking, and I'm going to keep asking because I really enjoy one, watching people struggle with it, but also the answers that I'm getting. If I were to ask you to tell me about the hardest day you've had in business, what would that look like? What comes to mind?
Oof. I think it's happened a lot of times, and it's my brain can go to a dark place. I'm not going to hide it. I started telling my friends like how dark it can get, and it's chemical, and it's happened a few times, and I can't even at that point understand that friends or my kids love me. And I'd say you're not choosing the easy road when you become an entrepreneur, right? Like, corporate life is not easy either. Working for someone else or with a team, you're always dealing with human personalities. There is just a loneliness that goes along sometimes with entrepreneurship. There are great days where you feel like people's heroes. You're giving people jobs. Man, Trevor, there have been, especially lately, it's been hard, and it's not one day. It's like a day that comes back, every few years, where I'm like, I can't handle this anymore. So sorry if that's too heavy. But I think as an entrepreneur, it's really, you got to check in with yourself. You got to know when it's okay to say, I need help. I think that's really important. And it's mindset, like, I'm going to turn this ship around, starting with myself. Yeah.
You think your motivation is like that's heavy. What's the motivation to keep doing it?
It's purpose. I think it's what your other guest said, like, figuring, and your purpose can change over time. It'll probably always come back to your value set, how you grew up, what your ethos is. That can improve over time, right? We're always trying to improve, or hopefully. It's about purpose, though. What am I going to get up and do today? And how does that make life better for everyone around me?
Yeah. I'll finish with if you ever need to talk, if you ever need to not feel lonely, and this is not just for you, Teresa, but for anybody else out there, just reach out. I want to make sure that we're building a bit of a community here, but also it can be lonely, and being able to talk to people that have been through it or understand what you're talking about when you talk about loneliness. So yeah, anytime you need to chat, let me know.
Likewise, my information's pretty public on the web, so anybody can hit me up, write me on Facebook Messenger. I'm sure you can find my cell phone number out there. So I feel the same way. If someone needs like an honest friend or a pep talk, like, I think there are a lot of people in the world who love you, right?
Yeah, 100%. Teresa, this has been awesome. A long and winding story to where we've landed today. I think we could dive into each of those pieces along your journey a lot more, and maybe we'll do that sometime down the road. But thanks so much for taking the time. It's been a true pleasure.
It's always an honor to be able to share time with you. Thank you so much for having me here, Trevor. Appreciate you so much.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank you.
Teresa.
Bye.
Bye.